So we're holding in the review of Tanya, we're holding by Perek Mem Aleph. Perek Mem Aleph. So last week we did Prakim Lamed Ches, Lamed Tes, and Mem. And last week we spoke about the importance of Kavana. And Kavana, by the Alter Rebbe's definition, Kavana is Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So we spoke about how Kavana is so important in a mitzvah. We explained why Kavana is so important in a mitzvah. That was, again, the three prakim which we discussed last week. That was the whole sugya. That was the topic. That was one long sugya explaining why Kavana is so important. Even though that the Hamaiso Iker, and even though that Hashem wants a dir b'tachtoinim, but nevertheless, why Kavana is so important. When we spoke about Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, they constitute the two wings, the Godfin, the two wings which a mitzvah uses to fly up to higher spiritual levels. But we spoke about Ava and Yira last week. We spoke about Ava and Yira as a couple. We kept on speaking about Kavana. What is Kavana? Ava, Ahava, and Yira. And now we're going to dissect Ahava and Yira, each one on their own. And before we dissect each one on their own, in Perek Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about why do we need each one on their own. Why? Okay, you're telling me that feeling is important. Why isn't love for Hashem enough? Why do we also have to have fear of Hashem? And once we find out why it's important to have Yira, to have awe, why is it that we need to have Avas Hashem? So in Perek Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe explains to us that as Yidden, we serve two roles, two functions. We are to Hashem, we are a Eved of Hashem, and we are also a Ben to Hashem. We are Hashem's servants, and we are also Hashem's children. This also, by the way, is connected to the two names that Klal Yisrael has. Yisrael is a Ben to Hashem, B'ni B'chayri Yisrael, and Yidden, as we know, Altira Avdi Yaakov, that Yaakov is the name associated with the idea of the Yidden are Evet Hashem. And both of these are necessary components in our Vedas Hashem. We have to be a Evet of Hashem, and we also have to be a Ben of Hashem. And Avdus, the idea of servitude, of being Hashem's Eved, is associated with Yira. And being a Ben for Hashem is associated with Ava. Now, is it possible that a servant loves his master? That's possible, yeah. But the definition of a servant, if you look up in Webster's dictionary, what is the definition of a servant? Doesn't say someone who loves his master. That might be a secondary thing. The definition of a servant is someone who has yira for his adon and knows that he has no choice, but he has to serve his master. And the same is true the other way around, a ben. Does a ben also have yira for the father? Does a ben also have awe and reverence for the father? Possibly, but that's not the definition of a son. The definition of a son is ava, that a child has ava for the father. Why is it necessary to have both, to be an eved and to be a ben? So in the beginning of Perek Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe lays down the Yesod, which is that every single time that ava is not enough for a mitzvah, and even if you're all excited and enthusiastic and passionate and in love, and therefore you want to do the mitzvah, that's not enough. You first have to sit down before you do the mitzvah. Anytime that you do a mitzvah, you have to take some time beforehand to think about Hashem and Hashem's greatness, and how Hashem created all the worlds, and how Hashem is the king of the world, and Hashem is your king, and therefore you have to follow His orders, His instructions, because you are an Eved of Hashem. Av alone is not enough. And the words that the Rebbe uses in Perek Mem Aleph, to bring it down from the Zohar, he says, if a person doesn't have Yiras Hashem, if a person isn't an Eved of Hashem, then there is no Kedusha on this person. The Torah says, The Torah says that we have to serve Hashem. Va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem. We have to be an eved of Hashem. Because so long that we're doing a mitzvah only because of Ahavas Hashem, so long as we're doing the mitzvah and it's only because I love Hashem and I'm so excited to do a mitzvah, so ultimately that act is about me, my desire. And if it's about my desire, then there is no Kedusha over there. Because as Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya many times over, that the prerequisite to Kedusha, the keli for anything which is Kadosh is Bittul. And Bittul is an Eved, not an Ben. The Eved is the one who has the Bittul. Otherwise, you could be a wonderful person and a spiritual person, but Kedusha, which means connection to Hashem, you're missing out. The Yesod of everything. Therefore, the foundation of all of Avodas Hashem is being an Eved, because only if you're an Eved is there Kedusha, which is present in your Torah mitzvahs, because Eved means you're putting aside your ego, you're putting aside your identity, you're putting aside your desires, and you're contemplating Hashem's greatness, and you're doing what Hashem wants of you. And as we spoke when we learned this Perek, this is a huge chiddush, because normally we think that what is Yiras Hashem needed for? When do I need to exercise my Yiras Hashem? When I'm not interested in doing a mitzvah, when I'm lazy and I don't want to do a mitzvah, or when I'm tempted to do an avera. So therefore, what do we call upon then? We call upon our Yiras Hashem. I fear Hashem, and therefore I have to do the mitzvah. Therefore I have to abstain from doing the avera. But most of us don't intuitively think that, what about when I'm not tempted to do anything wrong? To the contrary, right now I have a geschmack. I love Hashem so much that I want to sit down with a Gemara and I want to learn. I want to learn a Daf Gemara. I love Hashem so much. I want to give it tzedakah. I love Hashem so much. I want to right now wake up early and I want to put on my talis and my tefillin. I want to daven. Why do I need Yiras Hashem over here for? Here I have Avos Hashem. Yiras Hashem. Most of us look at it as something that we, as almost like a last resort, something that we have to resort to when the Ava isn't working. But if Ava is working, that's great. Why do I need Yira if Ava is working? But the chiddush of the Alter Rebbe over here is that our avodah always has to be in a way of eved. Every mitzvah, even if you have Ava, you also have to have Yira. Yira is the foundation of everything. In the opening, as Dr. Rabbi says in the opening words of Perek Lam Aleph, Yira is Reishas HaAvodah v'ikra v'sharsha. It's the beginning of the Avodah, the foundation of the Avodah, the root of the Avodah. Every single mitzvah that we do, every single time that we need to learn Torah, we learn Torah, it needs to be based in a Yiras Hashem, which means that we have to take time before we do a mitzvah, before we learn Torah. We have to take a few moments to contemplate Yiras Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, and how I have to be Hashem's servant, and I have to commit, therefore, to being, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, Valkein tzarech lavei lefanav, and therefore I have to serve Hashem be'ema uve'yira ko'emed lefnei hamelach, with fear and with reverence and with awe, as if I am standing before a king. So that is the Eved element. Element number one in doing a mitzvah is being an Eved to Hashem. And that, being an Eved, is associated with Yira. I have to have some sort of Yira. There are many different levels of Yira, as we'll touch upon later on in today's lesson. There are many levels of Yira, but I have to have at least a basic level of Yira in order for me to be considered an Eved Hashem, and therefore for there to be Kedusha within it.
You have to have Yira and Ava together?
Right now we're talking about Yira. We'll get to Ava in a moment. Yes.
Most people doesn't before make mitzvah, they make kavana, I'm going to make a mitzvah now to Hashem, I'm going to do this. Jump to the mitzvah. Most people, 90% of people, they don't think before. They don't have L'Shem Yichud. Some tefillot, some that you have L'Shem Yichud. You have to say it. But most of the thing, they don't have that.
Is that a question or a statement?
That's a statement that contradicts whatever you just said.
What you're saying is that 90% of people didn't learn Perek Lam Aleph and they're unaware of it, and therefore their Avodah isn't complete.
Sound good?
But Baruch Hashem, we are the 10% of people that are exposed to this, so we know the way it's supposed to be. So we don't have an excuse. They have an excuse. We can't judge them. They never learned it. We have to try to bring them to the Tanya share. But We have to always look at ourselves and say, I know I'm here by the Tanya share, I know the way it's supposed to be done, so I have to do it right. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says, Yira alone is not enough. Being an Eved alone is not enough, and also we have to be a Ben to Hashem. And a Ben to Hashem means that you have Ava to Hashem. And a Ben not only has Ava to a father, a child not only has love for a parent, but it's a very unique type of love. In that the ultimate level of Ben is that you do anything for your parents and it's not even about you. You care about your parents more than you care about yourself. You'll do anything for your parents. In the Zohar and the Raya Mehemna, it talks about a child whose parents are in captivity. And the child will do anything to get the parents out of captivity. And the child will even give up his life, will die if necessary, if that's what's necessary, in order to be able to gain the release of his parents from captivity. Now think about it for a second. If the child dies and the parents are released, so what did the child gain from it? If you're going to say that the reason why the child wants to release the parents and have them redeemed is because the child misses the parents. Every child wants to be around the parents. Okay? But then it wouldn't make sense for a child to give up their life for their father or for their mother, because then they have no benefit from it, they have no gain from it. So why would a child give up his or her life in order to be able to redeem the parent? It's because the child's love for the parent is so deep, it's even more than the child loves himself. In the words of the Zohar, that he says, the child has more love for the parents even than the child has love for his own body and for his own soul. And that's the ultimate love that a Yid has for Hashem. It's a love which is on the madrega of Ben. And this is very important. It's not enough to be an Eved, because when you're an Eved to Hashem, ultimately, what you're saying is, the idea of fear, and by the way, as we've spoken many times, to translate Yira as fear is not really a fear translation. Sorry for that pun. Because when you say the word fear, what's implied in English, when you say I fear something, the implication is almost always that you're fearing some sort of punishment or some sort of consequence, something bad that can happen to you. And Yiras Hashem does not at all mean that. We've spoken about this in the past. There is something called Yiras Ha'inish. Yiras Ha'inish means fear of punishment. The Alter Rebbe doesn't mention Yiras Ha'inish in Tanya. Yiras Ha'inish is not discussed in the entirety of Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe is talking about Yira, he's not talking about that. When a father tells a child, don't do something, I'm not talking about a 6-year-old child, the taka, so the child is not doing it because he's scared taka that he might be punished. But I'm talking about a mature child who's an adult, and the father or the mother says, I'm asking of you, please do this for me, or please don't do this. So together with the ava for the parent, there's also an element of yira. But the yira isn't, I'll be punished for it. The yira over here is more of a awe, more of a reverence, more of a, if my parent asks me to do it, I have to do it. Not because of ava. We're not talking here about ava. Not because I'm excited to, because perhaps I'm not excited to. Ava means I want to. Ultimately, the word ava is related to the word ava. Ava, which means to desire. Like V'lei ava Hashem shmei el bilam. Ava, when I have love for something, that means I have desire for it. So one thing is, my parents can tell me to do something, I desire to do it. That's ava. But what if I don't desire to do it? I'll do it anyways. Why? Because of yira. I have a respect. Yira is really respect, reverence, awe, fear altogether. Yira is when you're doing something because it's imposed upon you. It's not necessarily what you would desire to do, but because it's being imposed upon you by an entity that's greater than yourself. What makes that entity greater than yourself? Well, in the very, very lowest level, what makes that entity greater is that entity is holding a stick and can give you a clap. But that's the very, very lowest element. On a higher level, it's very possible that just the very existence of this higher entity, which is an imposing entity and an awe-inspiring entity, you have a year for that. By way of example, okay, imagine if Moshe Rabbeinu appeared right now in front of you and says, "Do me a favor, I want you to go to the next block for me and get me a coffee." It's probably not what he would ask if he would appear, but imagine that. So there would be an element of ava there. There's no question. You'd have a desire to, but there would also be a tremendous yira. What is your yira? That he's going to strike you with kinim or with svardeya? It's a yira from the person. It's a yira from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So yira is about something being imposed on you, even though you don't want to do it. Yes.
Rabbi, how would you translate the word kibud of the aim, and how does it fit into what we're talking about, yira and ahava?
That's a great question, but it's not really for now. In other words, that's a question on kibud of aim. And interestingly, there's two mitzvahs in the Torah. One is kibud avim, and the other one is meira avim. Ish avi imay tiro. So I'm talking more about the yira element. Kavod is something else. Halachically, kavod actually means to take care of the parents. That's what the halachic definition of kavod is. But yira of parents, what does it mean? Yira means you don't call your parents by their name. You stand up when they come into the room. You don't disagree with them. You don't agree with them, by the way. That's part of the mitzvah of Meira Avim. You don't even agree with your parents. That's a halacha and Shulchan Aruch. If your parent says something, you're not allowed to say, you're right, I agree with you. Why aren't you allowed to do that? Because what's the implication when you say that?
And that's right.
No.
I won't do it.
The implication is, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I happen to agree. By the way, tomorrow you might say something, and I don't agree, right? So the fact, who are you to agree? The fact that you're saying that you agree automatically already implies
you have a choice.
That you can disagree. Like, imagine if you're standing in front of a Rebbe, and the Rebbe says an idea, and you're like, I agree with that. What do you mean you agree with that?
Who asked you?
Who are you to agree or to disagree? But that's the level of moira we're supposed to have for parents. And that's a reverence. It's not about a fear of punishment. It's a reverence. It's acknowledging their higher status. But ultimately, what moira boils down to, what yira boils down to, is something which is imposed upon me. And that's very important in a mitzvah. Very important. That idea that I'm doing a mitzvah not only because I want to, not only because I'm a ben, but because I'm an eved. It's imposed upon me. Hashem is my melech, I have to do it. That's the bittul. When you're doing it because it's imposed upon you, that's the way it's supposed to be. And it's so interesting because we live in a society where that idea is so
weak.
It's weak, and it's not only it's weak, but people look at you like you're strange. We're talking about the advantage of doing something, not because you want to, but because it's imposed upon you. Yes, that's the Torah attitude. The Torah attitude is that bittul is the key to Kedusha. Bittul is the entryway. I have to do the mitzvah because it's imposed upon me. And the funny thing is, as we said earlier, that if I'm only doing it because I want to, that's not good. In this world today, everything is, I need to want to, it has to be about me. In Torah, it all starts with yira, imposed upon me. However, if it's only imposed upon me, if I only have yira, if I'm only an eved, and I don't have avam, then what happens is, although I'm doing all the mitzvahs, and although there's kedusha, I have kedusha because I'm batul to Hashem. But I am remaining outside of the loop. I'm only doing it because it's imposed upon me, which means that me doesn't want to do it. Think about that. If I'm doing it only because it's imposed upon me and I have no desire to do it, that means that I'm overriding myself. And the connection to Hashem isn't reaching also my midas and my emotions. My emotions aren't holy. I'm doing holy things. I'm serving Hashem, and thereby I'm a vehicle for Kedusha. But that Kedusha hasn't reached my personality, who I am. And that's why we also have to be a ben. A ben means it's not enough that I'm doing a mitzvah because it's imposed upon me. I also have to want to do it. That's a yid. Think about that for a second. It's almost like it's two opposites. And yet, every single time we do a mitzvah, we have to have both of these components. This is, when we talk about kavana, having avas Hashem and yiras Hashem means that I'm doing it both because I want to and because I have to. I want to is the avas Hashem, that's me being a ben for Hashem, and I have to, and that's the yiras Hashem that I have. And every time I do a mitzvah, both of these things have to be on my mind. I have to and I want to. First I have to, because that's the yisoid, that's the yira, that's the even, and also I want to, and that's the being the ben, that is the avas Hashem.
Isn't that negating the Yiras Hashem? You say Yiras Hashem is total spotless. Now you say you want to. Now you have a desire to do that. So how it looks like both of them seem to be in a contradiction.
They seem to be a contradiction, but they're not.
How do you explain that?
If your father asks you to do something, and you have a yira for your father, you have a yira. Do you have an option not to? Of course you have free choice. What I'm saying is, you feel compelled to.
Yeah.
Is it possible that at the same time you want to do it also?
Maybe, yeah.
But even though you want to, you know in the back of your mind that even if I didn't want to,
I would do it.
I would still do it. So for example, you wake up in the morning, and you know, I'm a Yid, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to daven, I'm going to put on film, I'm going to daven. You're going to do that every day, whether you're in the mood, whether you're not in the mood. Because you're compelled to do it. So on the day when you're in the mood of doing it, are you not compelled? You're also compelled. The only thing is that being compelled is a little under the surface, because today you happen to be in the mood, so you don't have to resort to that yira. Because today I want to, but what if I didn't want to? I would still do it because I'm compelled to. So if the fact that I would do it even if I wouldn't want to tells me that I feel that I have that yira. But what Dr. Rabbi says, it's not enough to have it buried underneath. We actually have to bring this to the fore of our consciousness. That before you daven, before in the morning when you wake up and before you put on your talos and tefillin, and before you daven, you should actually in your mind think, I'm doing this because I'm an Eved Hashem. And I'm also doing it because I love Hashem. These two ideas, the fact that I have to and the fact that I want to, when they are in a person's conscious mind and heart, when you're doing a mitzvah, that's the kavanah. And that's what takes the mitzvah and lifts it up to the highest places. Yes, Rafal.
Rabbi, therefore, we say 3 times a day, the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, be your hafta es Hashem. It doesn't say anything about Yira. Why is a hafta so important? Well, here we're learning it has to be a mix.
So 3 times a day you say v'ya hafta Hashem alikecha. I'm assuming you also say v'hoyim shabaya. I'm assuming you also continue, right?
All 3 of them, sure.
So then it says v'hoyim shabaya tishma mitzvayisai shonech mitzava eschem hayoim. Continue. No. La'avet Hashem alikeichem ula'avdei b'chol avavchem b'chol nafschem. Right? What's ula'avdei?
Evet.
So you have it right there. When you say Shema, you talk about being a Ahava, but you also talk about La'avdei.
All right, but still Ahava comes first.
In the Shema, the Ahava comes first, yes.
That's it.
But the Alter Rebbe says that in reality, it doesn't come first. In reality, the Yira comes first. The only thing is that the Yira comes beforehand. The Shema is the build-up of davening. The purpose of davening is Avas Hashem. The purpose of davening is not to build up Yiras Hashem. The primary purpose of davening is, as the Zohar says, "Las pulchana ku pulchana derichimusa." There is no service like the service of love. Va'aftas Hashem alikecha is like the apex of davening. But you can't start davening without the Yira. The first words of davening is Hoidu Lashem. What does Hoidu? Hoidu means submit. The word Hoidah means to acknowledge and submit. The Yira is before the davening, and then you build up until you get to Vahafta. But even in Shema also, you have there also the Ula'avdei. So we need to be a ben to Hashem. A ben to Hashem means that when we're doing a mitzvah, it's not only a love, but there's a selfish love and there's an unselfish love. A child has an unselfish love. So when we're doing a mitzvah, it has to be with a love for Hashem, like a child loves a parent. And therefore, when we do the mitzvah, we think, why does Hashem want this mitzvah done? And that's why before we start davening, we say, L'shem yichud kucha brichu shechinte. You mentioned that earlier. What does it mean, L'shem yichud kucha brichu shechinte? So without getting into the whole Kabbalah of it, but the whole purpose of all the creation of the worlds was to have, Hashem wanted the yichud kucha brichu shechinte. Yichud kucha brichu shechinte means the unification of kucha brichu, which is the infinite light of Hashem, and shechinte is that level of Hashem which enters our world. And when we have the unification of that, then what we're causing is that we have the unlimited light of Hashem entering this world, which that really is what Dira B'Tachtoinim is all about, bringing into this world the level of oyer, which is called Kucha Brichu, the level of light, which is called Kucha Brichu. So when we start davening, and we make a statement, and we say, L'shem yichud Kucha Brichu shchinte, what we're really saying is that Hashem, when I am davening now, not only when I'm davening is the beginning of the day, all the mitzvahs and Torah that I do afterwards, the purpose of it is, I'm doing mitzvahs because I want that your ratzain should be fulfilled. You're my father, I love you, just like a child wants that the father's will be done. The same thing is also, our avat Hashem is in a way that we turn to Hashem and say that Hashem, it's about, I want that your ratzain should be fulfilled. Now, this is a very, very high madriga. Dr. Rebbe admits that this is a level of great tzaddikim. Great tzaddikim have completely nullified their own ego, and their service of Hashem is mamish only just to bring Hashem happiness and nachas. There's no selfish interest in it whatsoever. Says the Alter Rebbe, however, in a small way, all of us can also do this. We can also have this in mind. Maybe it's not 100% authentic, the feeling, but to a small degree, all of us can also train ourselves that we're doing a mitzvah. We think to ourselves that I'm doing this in order to make Hashem happy and to bring Hashem nachas, and that Hashem's will be done over here in this world. That is the nekuda, pretty much, of Perek Mem Aleph, where again, in Perek Mem Aleph, after the earlier prakim, where the Alter Rebbe talks about Ava and Yira, but talks about them as a couple, talks about them together. Here we divide the two. We talk about Ava in terms of being a ben to Hashem, Yira in terms of being a evet to Hashem, and both are important. As we explained, the Yira is important because you need to have the bittul in order to have Kedusha, and the Ava is important because I want not only that the mitzvahs should be something that are imposed upon me, but that I should want it also, that my personality, my emotions, my feelings should also be in sync with Hashem, and should also desire to learn Torah and to do mitzvahs. That's Perek Mem Aleph. Once we've explained the function of Yira and Ava, now in the upcoming prakim, which is Mem Beis through Perek Nun, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about various different ways of arriving at Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem. Till now we're talking more about the why. Why Yira and Ava? But how? How do we go about getting Yira and Ava? So Perek Mem Beis and half of Perek Mem Gimel is about Yira, and then the second half of Perek Mem Gimel through Perek Nun. So that's the second half of Perek Mem Gimel, and then Mem Daled, Mem Hey, Mem Vav, Mem Zayin, Mem Ches, Mem Tes Nun. You have 8.5 prakim that we'll be talking about Avos Hashem. So we have a Perek and a half now about Yiras Hashem, and 8.5 prakim about Avos Hashem. So in Perek Mem Beis, the Alter Rebbe starts off and says, in Perek Mem Aleph, we mentioned this incidentally, that there's something called Yira Tata, the lower level of Yira. What is the lower level of Yira? The lowest level of Yira. Lowest level of Yira is simply taking time to think about Hashem and Hashem's greatness and Hashem's power and how Hashem created all the worlds and how Hashem created me, and therefore, because of all that, I have to be a servant of Hashem. That's Yira Tata, that's the lowest level of Yira. And Dr. Rebbe says that this is something which is achievable for every single Yid. Every single Yid can have Yira. Dr. Rebbe brings down the famous Gemara that's brought down that the pasuk says that Moshe turns to Klal Yisrael and says, "Va'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha sheil mi'imcha." Now, Yidden, what does Hashem ask of you? And Moshe continues, "Kiyim leyiras Hashem Elokecha." All Hashem is asking is that you should fear Him.
Is that simple?
Sorry.
Oh.
So the Gemara says, the Gemara asks, Altu Yira Milsa Zutra saying, is fearing Hashem a small thing? Moshe is making like, what does he want of you? All he wants, yeah. So the Gemara answers in Lagabi Moshe Milsa Zutra saying. For Moshe, tak, it's a small thing. So the Rebbe says, once that doesn't really answer the question. Imagine you have a surgeon goes over to the 5-year-old kid, and the kid has a conversation. The kid says to the surgeon, "So what do you do?" And he says, "I do brain surgery." The kid says, "Wow, brain surgery? That's so complicated." The surgeon says, "No, not at all. Brain surgery, no big deal. All you do is you take a little knife and you go like this, like this, like that. You finish the surgery." That's Moshe Rabbeinu coming to us and saying, "What? Yira? No big deal. For me, it's no big deal. Okay, for you, it's no big deal. But you're not talking to yourself. You're talking to Klal Yisrael." And Moshe was implying that for Klal Yisrael, it's a small thing. So how does the fact that for Moshe, it's a small thing, how does that help us understand this pasuk? So the Rebbe explains that Moshe Rabbeinu represents the idea of das. Moshe is rooted in the divine character trait, in the divine sphere of das. Moshe Rabbeinu, and also in every single generation, also there's a Moshe Rabbeinu. And by connecting to Moshe Rabbeinu, by connecting to das, by connecting to Moshe, by connecting to the Moshe and the generation, and also by connecting to our inner Moshe, to the das, because every single one of us has part of Moshe inside of us. That's why Moshe is called one of the Shiva Roim. He's one of the 7 shepherds, because he feeds us das. If we connect to the das, right? If we connect to the das, then Yira is Milsa Zutrasa. Yira is a small thing. What is das? Das means connection. Das means that not only do I know something, but it has become my reality. It is something that is real to me. It is something that I connect to. It is something that has emotionally impacted me. And unfortunately, many times we know things, but it gets stuck. We've spoken in the past how the neck is the narrowest part of the body. That's because the passageways from the brain to the heart are narrow, and things a lot of times get stuck, and there's blockages and things get clogged. And sometimes I know things, but it doesn't really impact me. It has not become my reality. As the famous story is said about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, that when he came back after learning for a while by the Maggid of Mezrich, and his father-in-law asked him, his father-in-law who was not a chassid, asked him, "Nusa, tell me, what did you learn by your great master? What did you gain over there?" So he told his father-in-law, "Now I know that there's a Eibishter. Now I know that there's a Hashem in the world." So the father-in-law started laughing at him. He says, that's what you learned over there?" And he called over, there was a maid nearby, a young girl, a Jewish girl. And he says to the maid, "Is there a Eibishter?" And she says, "Of course." So he says, "You went to your great master and spent all the time over there to gain the information that the maid over here already knows?" Mm-hmm. So Rabbi Yitzchak famously answered, "She says that there's an Eibishter, I know that there's an Eibishter."
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer.
As we say in the pasuk, "Ata yadaiti ki gadol Hashem." Yadati is das. Not ani mevin, but ani yodea. There's a difference. Ani mevin is I understand. Ani yodea is I know. In English, sometimes when you say I know, sometimes it means it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, but also I understand and I know. And I know means sometimes I know it on my flesh. I know it. That's das. Das is when you connect to something. Sorry? Derher. Yeah. In Yiddish, you can derher or you can derher. Yeah.
That's a very fatalistic to say that. Say that people that they go to school, public school, they go to university, they learn how, they learn to make a living. You go to yeshiva, you learn fire, you learn why you're living. Whole different. That's a good one.
There's a similar vart. There's actually a chassid. It's one of these things that In Yiddish it works well. And it's hard to translate. The Chassid went into the Alter Rebbe, into Yechidus, and he was telling all about himself to the Alter Rebbe, and he told the Alter Rebbe apparently he was a very big Talmid Chacham, he had learned a lot of Torah. So he told the Alter Rebbe all of his scholastic accomplishments, how much he had learned, how much Ashas he had learned, the Pesachim, Yerushalmi, Midrashim. And when he finished, the Alter Rebbe told him, "You're telling me how much Torah du hast gelernt, aber wie viel hat der Torah is gelernt?" In Yiddish, you tell me how much Torah you learned, but how much did Torah teach you? In other words, how much of it did you connect with? We know that a person can learn a lot of Torah, but not they don't connect with it.
Yeah.
And the same thing is also, we can believe in Hashem and not connect to it. You go to a Yid who does an Avera, and you say, "Do you believe in Hashem?" "Yeah." "Do you believe in Gan Eden?" "Yeah." "Do you believe in Gehenna?" "Yeah." So why do you do the Avera? What's the answer? Because there's lacking that das. The das is the connection. I believe it, I understand it, but did it become part of my reality? And if we have das, then Yira is no big deal. It's really no big deal.
The das is the problem.
Think about that for a second. If we were to connect truly, emotionally, to everything we know about Hashem, and how much do we know about Hashem? Not too much, but whatever we know, everyone sitting here around the table, Ba'asher hu sham, as much as you know. If all that knowledge sunk in and was a reality to you, would you ever do an Avera?
No.
So it's not about, the trick isn't to know more, the trick is to know deeper. I don't mean to delve into the concept, understand it deeper, but to take that understanding and bring it deeper inside you. That's what Das is all about. And Moshe Rabbeinu is Das. So Moshe Rabbeinu is turning to the Yidden and saying, all Hashem wants is to fear. And the Gemara says, what do you mean? That's a big deal. Yeah, but for Moshe it's not a big deal. Because Moshe is Das. And because you have Moshe inside you, if you access that Das inside you, Yiras Hashem also won't be a big deal. It just has to sink in. It has to really sink in. How does that happen? And this is where Chabad comes to play. We have to take time to be mizboinen. You have to take time to think about Hashem, to think about Hashem's greatness. And the Alter Rebbe says, how much time do you have to think into the greatness of Hashem? So he says, Shog G'deiler Ritzufa. It takes time. I know this is something we don't like doing.
What?
We don't like doing it. Human nature. We don't mind sitting for an hour and listening to Geshmak Yashir. We don't mind sitting down and spending 2 hours learning Daf Gemara, Siman Shulchan Aruch, but tell you to think about Hashem for 5 minutes, I can't do that. Because it's too personal. Because whatever you learn is theoretical, it's abstract. But to take something and to really just sit and allow it to marinate, allow it to soak, allow it to absorb, think about it in reality, that it's touching very deep, and it's difficult. When I say it's difficult, I mean psychologically, we find it difficult to do it. But ultimately, without that, there's nothing. Without Das, there's nothing. Das makes everything that we learned real. And to do that, you need a pasha take time. Shah G'deiler Ritzufa, the Alter Rebbe says, which means it takes time and consecutive time. In other words, you can't say, I'll think 20 seconds now, and then an hour I'll come back and think about it for another 20 seconds. And then on my lunch break, I'll put in a minute. Ritzufis means take time. And how long does it take? The Rebbe says, Shir Shazu Ein Neshama B'chal Nefesh. Not the same for everyone. So some people have a very edel neshama, and therefore, as soon as they think of the greatness of Hashem, automatically they have Yiras Hashem. Even if you think about in Shulchan Aruch, the beginning of Shulchan Aruch and Erech Chaim, it talks about when a person wakes up in the morning, he's supposed to immediately think about Yiras Hashem, but Hashem is standing above you. And it says in Shulchan Aruch, some people takes less time, some people takes more time. Some people have an edel neshama, a refined neshama, and therefore it doesn't take them a lot of time. Other people, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, it's hard. hard, difficult, very hard, especially if the person has done Averis. But nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, even if you have a low neshama, an insensitive neshama, and even if you've done Averis, if you take enough time and you think about it, bivadai, there is no question, you will find the das, you will find the yira, and every single person can have yiras Hashem. Some people takes longer, some people take shorter, but yiras Hashem is accessible for everyone.
So the bodhidut is very important here. Some people go to the forest, have 1 hour, 2 hours with bodhidut at you and Hashem. That's exactly what...
Alter Rebbe doesn't use the word hisbodedus, but it's also, it kind of makes sense that you can't stand in Grand Central Station and be mizbeinen. But Alter Rebbe doesn't say you can't do it by your dining room table. Doesn't necessarily have to be outside. That's more of a Breslover thing, is to go out to the forest. I'm not speaking against it, but I'm saying in Chabad, Alter Rebbe doesn't talk specifically about this idea of going out into nature, although there's nothing wrong with it. There's obviously for sure nothing wrong with it, and there's certain people who by them it's a derech navedas Hashem. But you could sit in your shul before davening. Put the talis over their shoulder. What?
How about learning Chavos Levavos? He goes through all this.
You can learn Chavos Levavos. That's not enough.
You have to stuff from somewhere.
Chavos Levavos is not enough. Why isn't it enough?
Why?
Because learning isn't enough. You're missing the point. It's not about learning, no. It's about the 5 minutes, 10 minutes after you finish learning the Chavos Levavos that you sit and you allow it to sink in and absorb. That's where the das happens. It's not, when you're learning Chavos Levavos, what you're doing is you're accruing, you're gaining more information. This is not what we're talking about.
But without the information,
you don't need.
You have nothing what to
let me put this in different words. You don't need more information. Everything that you know currently about Hashem isn't enough to bring you to Yira. More than enough.
Yeah, it could be.
It's absolutely more. Everything you know about Hashem. If you were to sat down and to write to me, if I asked you, I'm going to give you 15 minutes, write me down on a piece of paper everything you know about Hashem. And obviously Hashem is,
his
right?
Attributes.
And then read his attributes, his abilities, what he's accomplished, what he's done, your relationship with him, how much greater, write down everything you know about Hashem. Then read that paper afterwards and you tell me, is that not enough information for you to have a tremendous yira for him? So why don't you have a yira? You have the information, so why don't you have a yira?
You have to actually contemplate it.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's not the chas v'shalom of anything against Chavos Levavos. You have to learn Chavos Levavos, 100%.
I wonder why
but learning,
the Alter Rebbe should have mentioned it because he was a Rishon.
Maybe the Alter Rebbe, maybe not Tanya. Maybe the Alter Rebbe does mention him.
He probably does.
The Rebbe definitely told people. The Rebbe told many people to learn Chavos Levavos.
Yeah.
The Rebbe was very much into telling people to learn, especially Shar B'tachan and Chavos Levavos. In fact, the Rebbe has a whole mahalach. There's a whole famous sikha from the Rebbe where the Rebbe talks about B'tachan, and it's all based on the Chavos Levavos, who the Rebbe quotes extensively. But my point is that Chavos Levavos is not enough, because when you're sitting down learning something, what you're doing is you're trying to understand what it's saying. And Das is not about understanding something. It's about knowing it. The knowing happens after you understand. And it takes time, and it takes actual effort.
You first have to understand it, and then you know.
Correct. But if you stop at the understanding, then you haven't had the das yet. And then the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Mem Beis,
It's better to do this before Shacharis, an hour before. Like the Chassidim and Rishonim.
yes, it's definitely, it says in, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah, Ein Edem L'Spal L'Elam Etech Kovid Resh. And the Ramah brings down that before davening, you have to think about Begadlus HaKel and Shiflus HaAdam. That's how you get to Kovid Resh. So where are you going to get that from? Yeah, open up a Chavos Levavos, or open up a Tanya, open up a Sefer, absolutely. And davening is different then. But it's not enough to open up the Sefer. After you've closed the Sefer, before you daven, you need to stop for 5 minutes
And try to visualize.
and absorb. And by Chassidim always, there was the learning Chassidus, And then there's the davening, but between the two, there was the hispoinus, meditation. Which literally means just taking what you learned, and it's not about trying to understand it better, but it's passionate about absorbing it. Then the Alter Rebbe continues in the end of Perek Membeis, and he says that Yiras Hashem can also be facilitated. Yiras Hashem is also facilitated by getting used to viewing everything that you see as the levushim of Hashem. If you look at the world and you're used to seeing the Yad Hashem within everything, then you get rid of the problem, which is, how do I fear something which I can't see? It's not in my experience. But I want to read a few words from Alter Rebbe. Ha'ikar, the main thing is getting your mind used to tamid always. That it should be established always in your heart and in your mind. Whatever you see, with your eyes, the heaven, the earth, and all that's in it. These are all the garments of Hashem. And through this, you'll remember always what's going on inside them. In other words, the inside, what's inside the garment, which is Hashem. And Alter Rebbe says that this is also included in the word emunah. The word emunah comes from is related to the word oimein. Oimein or uman. What does a uman mean? Someone who has a craftsman, right? How do you become a craftsman? A lot of practice. If you want to master any craft, it takes a lot of practice, right, Yosef?
Perfect.
A lot of practice. You want to have emunah, it takes practice. Practice means that you should have to practice, you look around, and wherever you look and wherever you see, this is Hashem's garments. Meaning that just like when you see a king, you don't fear the king more if he's wearing more or less garments. The whole world, what is the world? Everything is only a levush, because the neshama of everything, the chayis of everything, after all, sorry? Kadosh Baruch Hu. So we don't get distracted by the goof. If I can give an example, there was when I was a bacher, there was another bacher who had a big disfiguration.
What?
A disfiguration from birth on his face. And I remember the first few times that I saw him, it was very
Disturbing.
It was disturbing, uncomfortable, and it impacted the relationship and the way I spoke to him. It's like first and foremost on my mind. Anyways, I got to know the bacher better, became friends with him actually, and after a while I didn't notice it before. And
Get used to it.
yeah.
You didn't see the.
What does it mean? You say I got used to it, but there's something deeper. It's not just that I got used to it. I didn't identify him by that anymore. I now knew the person. The first few times I didn't know the person. So when you look at it, for example, if you don't know someone, and someone asks you, describe me the person, what are you going to say? He has a big nose,
Crooked nose.
and this is the color here that he has, and he wears this color pants. If you know a person better and someone asks you to describe him, you're not going to describe the nose. You're not going to describe what?
This guy.
You got Thomas Midas, Malches, he's generous.
Not only, you might not even know what size his nose is. You forgot, because when you look at him, you don't see the nose anymore.
That's it.
When you see someone who you don't know, you're looking at the goof. You're seeing the body. And the first things you notice are the goof. But once you get to know a person, you don't even notice that. I remember, I was once, when I was a bacher in 770s, going back, 25 years ago, a little less. So, my father lives in Michigan. So he apparently came to visit New York one time, and I hadn't seen him yet, and someone comes over to me and said, I think I saw your father over here. I said, really? You saw my father? He said, yeah, the guy with the white beard. I'm like, my father? He doesn't have a white beard, he has a black beard. And he had a white beard by that time already. No, so what happened? When I'm looking at my father, I'm not looking at the beard at all. I'm looking at my father. Someone from the outside looks at him and sees the beard. When I look at my father, I don't see my father. I mean, I don't see the beard. I see my father. So the fact that the color was slowly changing, it never even registered, because when you have a relationship with someone, you're not looking at the chitzonius. At the outside, you're looking at the pnimius, and the outside, to a point, even stops registering. And think about that. The more you don't know a person, the more when you see them, you'll notice their levushim, their outside. And the more you know someone, you're not even going to notice their levushim. You notice the person. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying is, what's wanted of us is that we should recognize that this whole world is a levush to Hashem. Everything. It's raining outside now. It's Hashem bringing down the rain. There are certain people who are like that, right? Whatever is happening, this is Hashem doing this, Hashem is doing that. Everything that's happening in the world is Hashem. Everything that's in the world is a shliach of Hashem. In every incident that happens, you see Hashem. And you get used to it. It's training yourself. It's not something which comes natural. Maybe to some people, a drop more natural than others. Is seeing that everything is the levush, and ultimately gets to a point that you stop even noticing the levush. You're seeing Hashem everywhere. If you're seeing Hashem everywhere, of course you're going to have Yiras Hashem. A problem for Yiras Hashem is that we don't see Hashem, but we could see Hashem. You're seeing expressions of Hashem. You're seeing the garments of Hashem wherever you go, and that's how you come to Yiras Hashem, through His Beinunus, thinking about the greatness of Hashem, mentioned earlier on Das. And also through training yourself that wherever you are and wherever you look, you see Hashem everywhere. And this way you wake up in the morning. Anything, this happened, that happened, this, you see that, it's all the garments of Hashem. Yeah?
This could also bring to Avos Hashem, no?
We're not talking about Avos Hashem right now. No, you're absolutely correct. In general, the Isboilinus, the greatness of Hashem leads to both places, yes. But right now we're talking about Yiras Hashem, and it's, to a certain extent, your choice which way to direct the emotion that's coming, and you need to direct it in both ways, talking. But right now, our focus is on Yiras Hashem. So that's Perek Mem Beis. Perek Mem Beis, the Alter Rebbe is talking practically, how does a Yid come to Yiras Hashem? So again, to recap, Perek Mem Aleph was the Alter Rebbe spoke about why we need Ava and Yira, each one individually, why you need to be a Eved, and why you need to be a Ben. Perek Mem Beis, how every single Yid can arrive at Yira, and that's through Das, and that's also through looking around and seeing Hashem everywhere. And then at Perek Mem Gimel, the Alter Rebbe says, you should know that everything we spoke about up until now was all the lower level of Yira, which is called Yira Tata. There are two levels of Yira. You have in Pirkei Avos, in Ein Yira, in Chachma, in Chachma and Yira. It's two different levels of Yira. First, you have to have a lower level of Yira in order to have Chachma. And then, if you have Chachma, then you have a higher level of Yira, in Chachma, Ein Yira. All the lower levels of Yira is that your fear of Hashem, your reverence of Hashem, your awe of Hashem is based on Hashem's actions, on His power. What He's accomplished, the worlds He's created. He's Memala Kol Almin, He's Sovev Kol Almin, He transcends the worlds, He fills the worlds. Greater than the worlds. But all that is limited then, because ultimately, number one, you're limiting Hashem by His actions, but also, are you fearing Hashem or are you fearing His actions? And an example that Alter Rebbe brings, not in Perek Mem Gimel, but he brings it elsewhere, in a beer on Perek Mem Gimel. He says, what's the difference between the fear you have for a king and the fear you have for a great tzaddik? Both of them, you have yira for them. The difference is that a king, how much yira are you going to have for the king? Well, it depends. How big of a king is he? So let's use a modern, you have a governor. How much yira are you going to have for a governor? Yira is in reverence. Well, is he the government of Wyoming, which means that he was voted in by 4 people on a coyote? Or is he the governor of California, which means that there's 40 to 50 million people underneath him? It makes a difference, right? And if you're a head of state, are you the head of state of a superpower, or are you the head of state of Rwanda or something? Right? It makes a difference. So therefore, your yira, your reverence that you have for a king, is largely dependent on how much he's accomplished and how much he controls. Your reverence for a tzaddik has nothing to do with how much he controls. It's for him. It's called a yiras harememus. It is the essence of the tzaddik that causes the yira. And the same thing is in our fear of Hashem. The lower level of yira is yira tata, which is, I have such incredible reverence for Hashem because of all He's accomplished. The higher level of yira, which is the greatest level of yira, called yiras harememus, is that the fear is, the awe is from Him. I feel utterly insignificant in Hashem's presence. It's not even that I'm afraid to do an Avera. Remember, earlier we spoke about Yiras HaEinish. Yiras HaEinish is the lowest level, fear of punishment. Then there's another level, which is Yiras Chet. Yiras Chet is a higher level. What does Yiras Chet mean? I'm afraid to do the sin. Why? Not because I'm going to be punished, but because I was told not to. Imagine like a tzaddik tells you, don't do this. Tzaddik is right in front of you, and there's an apple on the table, and the tzaddik says, don't eat it. Are you going to eat it? No. Why? Because you're worried he'll punish you? No. You're feared to do something which he tells you not to do. That's called Yiras Chet. But both Yiras HaEinish and Yiras Chet are about, I won't do this. Yiras HaRememus, or what's called Yiras Boishas, is not about what I will do. It's about the way I feel in the presence of that tzaddik. I feel utterly insignificant. I feel overwhelmed by the presence. The highest level of Yira is not even about what I will do or I won't do. It's this feeling of being completely in awe and overwhelmed in the presence of Hashem. That's the higher level of Yira. After Rabbi says, both in the lower level of Yira and the higher level of Yira, there are many, many different levels. What we have to know is that the lowest level of Yira is achievable by everyone, through Das and through looking around the world and seeing Hashem everywhere. And then we have to climb in the lower level of Yira, because the lower level of Yira itself is comprised of many levels. And once we've done that, we arrive at Chachma, and then we're ready even also for the higher level of Yira. Here we are in the middle of Perek Mem Gimel. In the middle of Perek Mem Gimel, the Alter Rebbe transitions to Avas Hashem, and we will continue on that in Yirtzeh Hashem this upcoming week. So a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh, everyone.